Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us in our live stream sessions. Today, we'll focus on study history in the United States. My name is Hani. I am the EducationUSA advisor in the Fulbright Commission in Prague. And my two special guests who are going to be taking you on a history tour through history major in United States are Bia and Elise. They're both Fulbright grantees and are currently teaching English at Czech high schools. Hello, girls. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello, honey. Thank you for having us.
Hi, yeah. Okay, so my name's Beatrice Voorhees, and I went to Connecticut College. I graduated last May. I majored in history and Slavic studies. I was a double major. If you have any questions about my presentation or anything, feel free to email me. My email's right there on the screen. Would love to help anybody if you're curious about it.
Yeah. Howdy, y'all. My name is Elise Wright. I went to Wake Forest University for my bachelor's in history. I graduated in 2022, and I liked it so much, I came back for more, and I have a master's in liberal arts studies with a concentration in Protestant Reformation history, also from Wake Forest, and I graduated with my master's in 2023.
1 year for your master's. That's impressive. Wow.
Yeah. We crammed it all in. We did summer school and we got her done.
That's amazing.
Okay, so to start with, what is history, right? We all sort of know what history is. It's the study of the past. But at a college level, it focuses a lot on interpretation, taking primary sources, primary documents, and reading through them, valuing them, pulling quotes out of them, and trying to extrapolate a bigger picture of what's going on. I don't think in any of my courses I had a textbook that's like, this happened in this year and this happened in this year. Most of it is like you're studying a primary source or somebody's analysis of a historical event. And it's a lot about arguments, about sources, about culture. And I think another important thing to know about history and studying history in the US is that the focus is really changing. For a long time, it was, as it was in much of the world, the focus of history and of education was on Europe and America, Western civilization. And I think history is really shifting, or the way history is taught is shifting to include more diverse perspectives from people who were sort of historically maybe excluded from the narrative, as well as interrogating imperialism, Eurocentrism, colonialism, all these kinds of things that have become sort of outdated, really challenging that and including more diversity of perspective. I think one thing that's important to know about being a history major, you should expect to spend a lot of time reading and writing. That's a lot of what it's going to be. So if you don't really enjoy that, I think it might not be for you. But for me, it really worked out well. I really liked it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you tell me, Elise, I love reading and I love writing, but isn't history just like a bunch of memorizing dates? Like that's super boring. Well, let me tell you, no, history is not just about memorizing dates. When you get into college, the professors are going to assume that you know when stuff happens. And if you don't know when it happens, that you can Google it and find really fast that the Meiji Restoration happened in 1868. So that's never going to be on a test. Instead, your test is about why did it happen? What are the effects? Did it actually happen the way we think it was? So history isn't about memorizing dates. It's about argument. It's about debate. You'll get to see the proverbial fist fights between historians about what actually happened. Why did it actually happen? All right. And history also isn't a social science. History isn't about making graphs and quantitative analysis. History is more about literary arguments. How can you convince someone using the analysis of the text or the painting or the object that you have? If you're interested in studying people and trends over time using more quantitative analysis, something like political science or economics or anthropology is more along that vein. I'm not saying that history never uses graphs. I'm just saying that the verbal argumentation piece is more important in history and the quantitative analysis is less important. So the pictures on this screen are all pictures from a course that I took that I think sort of summarizes these trends really nicely. This was my History of Tea course that I took when I was a sophomore in high school, or not in high school, in college, sorry. So it sounds really pedantic, but this course was sort of a sweeping Southeast Asian economic history, but it also dove into Japanese and Chinese cultural and religious history. We looked at European, specifically English colonialism in India. And then we even talked about like object history. I did a project about a physical tea set in the museum that's associated with my university. So that's just one example of a way that college history courses aren't Eurocentric. They're not memorizing dates. They're not just a bunch of stuff happening. There's a lot more to it than just memorizing dates. So B, would you tell us more?
About dates or about
about history, about studying history.
Oh, about studying history? Maybe I should tell you where to study history. I don't know. It might be a good idea. So, where to study history? Most colleges offer a history degree. It's really, I think it's very popular. It's one of the most popular degrees, I would say. And I would say really, I think, the better the school in general, the better the history department is going to be. I would recommend, from my own personal experience, I would recommend any college or university where there's smaller seminar style classes that you can take, where it's sort of a more like discussion-based setting. I really enjoyed those classes the most. I had a few bigger like lecture style classes, and while they were interesting, I think you don't really connect with the other students or with the professor as much, just because it's more like information being transmitted to you rather than discussion and collaboration. So yeah, I would recommend if there's a program with like smaller seminar classes. And then also I would recommend if it's possible, like if you're really interested in something specific, for example, you want to study South Asian history, you're inspired by Elise's tea class to do so, you might want to look and see what colleges or universities have professors who are experts in that field, and people you would want to work with, I guess, if you have something more specific. If you don't have something more specific you're interested in, then I don't know, you can kind of go anywhere, I guess. And so one college that I'd recommend maybe looking at that's pretty interesting is Berea College, which is a small liberal arts college in Kentucky. And what's interesting about Berea College is that it's a work college, which means all the students have a part-time job there, and the job completely reimburses your tuition. So you go there without paying any tuition at all, and they accept a high number of international students. So I think if you're concerned about finances and interested in like a liberal arts school, this could be a good option, I guess. And then I would also recommend my own college, Connecticut College. I really enjoyed studying there. The department, I really enjoyed my smaller classes. I had a lot of them. It was great. So yeah.
And I'm going to also shamelessly plug my alma mater. Wake Forest University was fantastic. My history professors wrote the letters of recommendation that got me here where I am today. And I had just such a lovely rapport with the men and women who taught me in my college. Really helped shape me as a scholar, and shaped my interests, shaped the way that I articulate myself. But I also wanted to bring Wake up because Wake Forest's history department has a really diverse number of course offerings, even though Wake is super, super small. So we've got, Renaissance and Greek history professors. We have a professor of Chinese history. We have professors in Japanese history and South American history and African history, like you name it. We've got it. And it's a really small university. And if you go to a larger state college, you're going to have even more professors teaching and even more diverse course offerings. So I would just research whatever universities you're looking at applying. And if you have that specific interest, go to the Wake Forest /history department page and see what the professors have published about. So you can get some more specific information. Yeah. So B, do you want to tell us how you got into history, how the history bug bit you?
Yeah, I do. Sure. So, okay. So in high school, I really did not like history. I enjoyed some of my history classes, but I had a real issue with the way that I was taught American history, which is that I had it every year from when I was in like 5th grade until I was in high school. I had every year we had social studies, and social studies was American history. And so I felt like, oh, I know it. Like I know all of it already, right? And then I had to take it again to graduate from high school. And I was very frustrated from taking what I felt like was the same thing over and over again. And from my modern perspective, I can see that this might be sort of, an America-centric, maybe like a Western civilization-centric method of education. But in my lived experience, basically it meant that I thought I didn't like history. And so I actually, my senior year of high school, completely rearranged my schedule to avoid taking any history classes. I did not take it. Then in college, as part of my Slavic studies major, basically I was taking classes that were cross-listed between Slavic studies and history. And so they're taught by professors from one department or another, but they're connected, they're interdisciplinary, and so they're listed in both sections. And I was like, wow, wait, this is actually really interesting now that we're actually learning about something I care about, like an area of the world I don't already know about. I'm like, okay, this is actually like what I'm interested in doing. And so my sophomore year, I decided to minor in history. And then my junior year, I did a lot of complicated math, and I was like, well, if I take this class at this time, and if I do this, then I'm like, okay, well, I can double major, and I can do Slavic studies and history double major. So that's what I ended up doing.
Wow.
And that was kind of my roadmap to how it ended up like this. So a little bit about my experience. I would say definitely my classes with the most assigned reading. It was usually really interesting. It was never like, oh, I have to do it. Well, sometimes it was, but like oftentimes I was like, wow, like this is so cool. And then I would like read, it was really cool. And like, I don't know, I really liked the readings that usually my professors would assign. Like memoirs, especially. I remember reading a lot of really interesting like first-person perspectives on different historical events. I think like any college major, I had some, I don't know. Maybe I would say I had some absolutely amazing professors. I don't think every college major has as amazing professors as I had. I think there were some that were not so good. And so I don't know. I think that's with any major, I would say. And so my school also had a regional distribution requirement. Basically, you had to, for example, you couldn't only take classes about Europe, for example. It was a little complicated how it worked, but basically you had to study different areas of the world. And so it led me to take some really interesting classes that I wouldn't have otherwise, including a class about Islam in Asia and like the spread of Islam throughout Asia, to like Indonesia and the Philippines. Really interesting, really liked that class and the professor as well. And I wouldn't have taken it if I wasn't required to, but I'm really glad I was required to take it. I think I was very supported by the department, and even the professors who weren't good at teaching were really nice. I think I had some professors who were like, maybe like I didn't like their style of teaching as much, but they were so nice and like so like helpful, even though I didn't like them. And so I felt bad. Sorry. I'm giving a very honest review, I think. I also really liked and got along with my classmates. I met a ton of cool people who were also studying history. And in fact, I liked it so much that, so my school has what's called student advisory boards. It's a team of students in a department that serve as sort of, they advise about classes, they organize different events and stuff. And so I was the social media manager. I made a bunch of posters for different events, and including, this was the history like keynote lecture you can see on it with Jelani Favors. He was the speaker. That was really cool to hear him talk and everything, because he's a really good speaker. And here are some more posters for some other events that the department did. So this was put on by the student advisory board, and then I made the posters for them. I think this gives you both a sample of like the kinds of events and the kinds of community that like a history department can have, but it also gives you a sense of like some opportunities. Like this is a thing you could do if you were at a college. You could be the social media manager for a department or something. That could be fun. So yeah, so these are some interesting events. And so my favorite classes, this is a picture of what like a typical like upper level seminar classroom looks like. This is at Connecticut College. I couldn't find a picture of like a class that I was in, but I've had classes in this classroom. It's just, I don't know who any of these people are, sorry. So hopefully it gives you a bit of a sense of it. And so my favorite classes, for sure, up there is a class called Growing Up in Africa. It was so interesting. It was taught by a professor of African history. And in fact, I took my first African history class because of the regional distribution stuff. And then I was like, wait, like this is so interesting. I gotta keep taking more classes. And so I took Growing Up in Africa. And basically it was we read a series of narratives from like across the 20th century of different like young adults, teenagers, children, like in different like countries, in different like political situations, different things going on in their lives. And it was really just like interesting to both learn about like, it was sort of like a literature, like coming of age, but it was also like about like 20th century African history. So that was really interesting. I also took a class, 19th Century America. I took this with Professor Chris Klein Hernandez, who was one of my favorite professors. I took this class in my last semester, and I really liked him as a professor. If I could go back, I would have taken more classes with him. And it was really cool because, you know, American history, as discussed, not my favorite subject in the entire world, but he really made an effort to include like diverse perspectives. And so like when we talked about 19th century America, we didn't only talk about the United States, because when you really think about it, North America, it's not just the United States, right? So we talked about Haiti, we talked about stuff in the Caribbean, we talked about Mexico. It was really interesting, and it was a really good perspective on like, I don't know, it was really interesting. One of my favorite classes, Soviet Union and its legacies. This was the class, to be honest, that I took. It was cross-listed between Slavic studies and history, and I was like, okay, wait, like I really actually do like history. The professor who was teaching the class became my history advisor. And then I took a class also simply called Berlin. And you might be thinking, now, what could you learn about Berlin for a whole semester? But I'll explain. So it was basically the past 6 centuries of German history. But instead of being all like, this happened and this happened and this happened, we studied the past 6 centuries of German history, but how it impacted the city of Berlin. And a lot of it impacted the city of Berlin, right? You know, you have like the German Empire being united in 1871 from World War I, World War II, then the divided Berlin, obviously that's a huge marker of the 20th century, the reunification. And so we studied the buildings, the architecture, the people, and it was a really interesting class and a really interesting lens on like history, I guess, is through this one city and seeing like, okay, how did all these things change? What was making it change? Like what bigger things were happening at that time?
That is super cool. I wish that I could have taken a class like that.
It was awesome. I really enjoyed that class. Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. So I'll kick it to Elise.
Yeah. So in high school, I loved history. Personally, I'm a little bit different from B in that way, in that my high school, I got to experience more than just American history over and over and over again. Because I took a bunch of Latin classes and I competed in this, like, I called it the Nerd Olympics. It was like a Latin and Roman history trivia game that me and the Latin club, we would like go around North Carolina in high school competing in Roman history trivia. And I like made the t-shirt for the club and everything. So I loved history in high school, and history wasn't just American history. There was other stuff going on too. I took European history and American history at the same time. It was great. But you realize though, I didn't just love history. I also loved science, and I loved my art classes, and I loved my literature classes. And so if you go to the next slide, I couldn't decide once I got to college what I wanted to do, because I thought science was really cool. And I was like, maybe I'm going to be a doctor. But then I thought the humanities were really cool. And then, I mean, there's so much in the humanities. There's history, but there's also literature and art. And like, I could keep studying Latin. Do I want to learn another language? I couldn't make up my mind. So if you go to the next slide, because of those 2 AP history classes that I took in high school, if I was a history major, then I had enough extra credits that I could study like a ton of other stuff. So if I was a history major, then I could pursue my interest in history and also pursue my interests in science and in art and in language. So that is what I ended up doing. I chose the major that let me study as many other disciplines as possible. And also, history overlaps with a lot of different disciplines, a lot of other subjects, which I'll talk more about that in a little bit. If you go to the next slide, this is where we ended up. Instead of having like one major and a minor, or even a double major, I was one major and I was a minor in chemistry and in biology and in Latin. I was the only person in advanced Latin grammar, the history of the US Constitution, and organic chemistry at the same time. Like that was me in college. We put them all together. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see some of my very most favorite classes were the history of science, magic, and alchemy, represented by John of Rupasissa, which is a way of looking at medieval history and then the scientific revolution and the Renaissance, but looking specifically at the way that knowledge was perceived and the way that convincing people that something was true changed over time. And so, yes, I got to study magic in college, which was a pretty wild experience. I also took, one of my favorite courses was my early Middle Ages course. So I got to study magicians, and then I got to study Vikings, which I thought that was pretty dope. And then one of my other favorite courses, it was called The Outlaws of History, or the History of Global Outlaws. And it was taught by one of my favorite professors, Dr. Coates. And what this course was basically the history of international law, which, if you put it that way, sounds incredibly dry. But it wasn't just the history of international law. It was the history of the people who broke it. And so the first international laws were the laws of the sea. And the first people who broke the laws of the sea, well, those were pirates. So we talked about pirates for like the first month of class. It was awesome. And then one of my other favorite classes was the history of the American West, which, like B's class about America in, was it the 19th century? This was also looking at the American West before it was the United States of America. And it was a fascinating cross-section of Native culture, of Spanish culture, of French culture, of American culture. And so I threw up a picture of Quanah Parker, one of my favorite historical figures from this class. And I have down on the bottom of the slide other classes that I took, which I won't go into for the sake of time. But one of the reasons why I loved this major so much was because it was never boring. It was infinitely varied. There were classes every semester that I wish I could have taken, but they just didn't fit in my schedule. So yeah, so if you'll go to the next slide. I can't remember what's after this. Oh yes, this is like a summary of my favorite parts of my history major: pirates and Vikings and cowboys. Oh my, yeah. Okay, and so if you remember when I said that history overlaps with other subjects, I got to do some undergraduate research. I applied for a grant for my university, and the university gave me some money, which I invested in chemical equipment. And so I studied 17th century English chemistry in my garage during the COVID summer of 2020. Right. And so this was an awesome overlap between my interest in the history of the scientific Reformation and of England in the 17th century and my interest in chemistry and the physical sciences. So yeah, my little brother, he was my wingman, helping me not burn our garage down. And so I tried to interpret the recipes that I found in my research for chemistry in the 17th century, see if I could actually do them. I was not very successful, but it was a learning experience and I had a good time. Also, when I was an undergraduate, I wrote a a thesis so that I could graduate with honors in history. And my thesis was about the last great plague of London, which I wrote it during 2020 and 2021. So it kind of makes sense why I chose that topic. But again, it was at this point, I didn't know what I was going to do when I graduated. So I was thinking, maybe I'll go into medicine, maybe I'll do something that's not medicine. And so this topic was sort of an overlap between my interest in history and my interest in medicine and in biology and immunology and epidemiology. And then for my master's thesis, I studied the Protestant Reformation in England. And I came to this subject for a number of reasons, but I was really interested in looking at ideological conflict because I felt like there was a lot of that in our current society. So I was like, I'll look at ideological conflict 400 years ago. And then this project was interesting because a lot of my resources were written in Latin. So I got to use my skills from my Latin classes in my history thesis. So my big projects in history were really not just history projects, but history overlapped with the other subjects that I'm also interested in. Yeah.
If I can say something, I feel the same way about my own projects. My honors thesis was, I wrote it in the Slavic Studies department, but it was like a sort of a historical study of the city of Odessa, and the Jewish community there, as well as like artistic influence. So I feel like even with a lot of different projects, you can combine your interests to create something that you really want to bring into the world.
Yeah. And that's, I guess, the nice thing about history courses, there's always a research project. So even if you're, taking this course because it fulfills a requirement, there's going to be a research project and you're going to be able to find like however this topic piques your interest and you can really dive into that one thing. Yeah. So, all right. So the big question that I hear a lot. So you're a history major. What are you going to do with that? According to my parents, I'm going to be some sort of sophisticated professional. They're not clear what sort of professional. They just know that I'm going to be a suit. I'm going to be making the money. According to my friends, I'm going to be in front of the college lecture hall, spewing nonsense that no one understands. According to my professors, I'm going to be, like living my life, reading books, and it's going to be awesome. I don't know. They don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to be reading books. According to society, history major is going to serve you coffee at a coffee shop. According to my little brother, he thinks that I'm a little bit crazy and I'm trying to predict the future by studying the past. But, what do I do with my history major? Well, according to me, I am currently living my best life in Europe, which is kind of a dream. And I'm getting to meet all these really cool people and go to really cool places. So that is what I am personally doing with my history major. But B, can you give us a little more general answer of what do you do with a history major?
Absolutely, I can. So beyond those options that Elise has presented to us, I would say that majoring in history is a really flexible degree, because basically you major in history. It means that you have a strong attention to detail. It means you can read big books and understand them. It means that you're good at researching. You're good at analyzing that research into a document, and producing a written paper that has an argument in it. You're good at making arguments. You're good at writing in English, right? You're you could be in a different language, but you're good at the skill of writing, right? And so all of these skills are things that make you very desirable for different jobs in all sorts of fields, right? Strong attention to detail, good at researching, good at writing, good at communicating as well, right? Because when you're in a seminar style class, you're communicating your arguments verbally, right? You're able to debate with others in a civilized way. You're able to make your points in a clear way as well. And so this makes you pretty appealing to a lot of different kinds of jobs. And it doesn't just have to be in a museum or in archives. It could be, and then it's very directly related to history, right? You could be a history professor, and then it's extremely related to history, right? But it could also be, you could work in businesses, different kinds of businesses, or anything with writing, really. You could be a journalist, you could be a writer or an editor, right? That is a very similar skill, I would say, as well as with law, right? Analyzing arguments. Law is all about arguments, and so it's very applicable to that as well. As well as libraries, right? There's sort of a whole side of caretaking of historical knowledge and institutions. So we've got archives, libraries, museums, but then you can also do other things with these skills. You could be a teacher as well. You could be a teacher of history. You could also be a researcher, not just in history, but in other topics as well, political research, political analysis, that kind of stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of possibilities, and it's quite multifaceted, I would say. Yeah.
To give you two real world examples, one of my good friends in college, she graduated with a degree in history from Wake Forest, and I believe that she has completed now her first first year and a half as a lawyer. She passed the bar in the state of Virginia. So she went to law school in Richmond and then became a lawyer in Virginia. And then my little brother's girlfriend was a history and art double major from North Carolina State University, which is a state school, not a private school like mine. And Lily is now the assistant curator at a small museum in Hickory, North Carolina. So Lily has gone the museum route, and then my other friend went the becoming a lawyer route. But there are other options. Those are just two examples.
Yeah, surely between museums and becoming a lawyer, there is a middle ground.
Yeah, there's teaching really cool Czech kids in the Czech Republic English. That's another option. Yeah, but you know, I can hear you say, but I already know what I want to do. I know that I want to go into law. Like, why do I have to study? I don't know. Why do I have to study tea in Asia? That doesn't have to do with law. Well, you know, you don't have to study tea in Asia. And you can take classes that are more specifically focused into whatever your career would be. So a lot of my classes, or several of my classes, were focused on the history of law in preparation for a potential career in law. Yeah. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
No, I really feel that being able to kind of gain the knowledge from various parts, you know, and then putting it all together, maybe in the law, you know, school and so forth, it makes such a difference than when you are just solely focused on law and you don't see left or right, you just go straight ahead. So, oh my God, I'm speechless. This was so amazing because honestly, I was like, history for me from high school, this was memorizing data. This is all it was, you know, like we didn't only focus on Czech history, we did like international and American and so forth, but I had to know exactly when, what time did this, who came into where, and what did he do there. And we never ever learned about tea and pirates and cowboys, and it was just not, no. And now when I heard it, I would love to go back and I would love to experience it because I think it's so important to know about history. And as you can see, and guys who are watching, you can definitely like cross use it, let's say, to other majors and minors. And look at Elise, she had 1 major, 3 minors. Bia had Slavic studies as well, you know. So it's not just history, but there is so much you can do with it. So thank you so much, ladies. This was so informative and so fun, and I love the memes, you know, and and I love the factual data, you know, like both. And I hope that you guys got excited. And if you have any questions, you can send them to Bia and Elise. You can send them to me. You can reach out to me via social media under Education USA Czech, and I'm happy to connect you. If you're interested in Connecticut College or Wake Forest University, different major, but just the institution itself, these guys are so biased that you should be talking to them, you know, and they're gonna help you, you know, decide whether it's a good fit for you as well. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for presenting, girls, and I'll see you later. Bye.
Thank you.